Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is Kathy Gardarian. She's the founder and CEO of Qualis International, a multi-billion-dollar sales and distribution company. She has been a director on many corporate and nonprofit boards, including Vans Inc., the Business World Academy, Chapman University, among others. She's also been a part of the Women's Leadership Board at Harvard, JFK School. She was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Association of Women Business Owners, and her company Qualis International has been one of the top 40 women-owned businesses in Orange County in Southern California. She lives near Newport Coast, California. Over the years, Kathy has shared her empowerment story of feminine-driven success across the country and is available for speaking events and businesses, universities, and conferences, and more. Welcome Kathy to the podcast. Well, Kathy, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Good to have you on. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Love talking about entrepreneurship and leadership, so two of my favorite topics.
Great.
I love to ask my guests this question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
You know, I think it's that is basically that business is relationship, and you have to lead with love. When there's just room for the human spirit in the equation, really things just go. There's so much more productive, and 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 really actually more profitable. It's just easier to get along, and it's just more authentic. You drop the barriers. It's nice.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, people like yourself who've achieved a certain level of success, we don't get there by ourselves. So who are some role models for you and maybe some mentors along your journey? You want to kind of tell us what made them special and just kind of give them
Okay.
a shout out, give them a thank you for their involvement.
Oh, they know. But I do want to say that I had a lot of personal friends that talked to me a lot about my situation at the time, and I did listen to them because they were successful already and they made a lot of sense. And I can tell you more about that when I tell you my personal story. But probably the biggest influence later was something called the World Business Academy, and it was an academy of all CEOs, and I had to fly up from Southern California to San Francisco every month for the meeting, and I didn't miss a meeting in 22 years, and we had them all over the world because it was so valuable to have the authentic, real people that wanted to put spirit into business and ethics and morals, and to really care about people, and to be the change we wanted to see in the world, especially in business. So I'd say the World Business Academy.
I
Yeah.
noticed that I don't see as much of that in business anymore. Why is that shifted? Or maybe I'm just missing it.
Well, no, I agree with you, and I, in my story, really, I'm, I was so. First of all, my story is that I didn't even think about having my own company. I was an independent contractor. I was doing sales, and I was working for these five men in LA that owned a company. And I was unfortunately the only female salesperson in the company. So they'd close the door of the sales meeting, and the president of the company was there's like 30 guys and me in the room. And he would say, well, yes, Kathy has the highest sales totals again this month. So, how do you guys like being beat up by a skirt? And he used to all these things about taking women and putting them lower than men. And I'm not saying that it still doesn't go on, but I think it's a little bit better. And I'm not sure you could say that anymore to someone. But, and then I remember one time we were standing in the warehouse because it was a distribution sales company. And there were so many products, all around. And I was looking at him, and he looked at me and he said, you're a woman and you could never do this. And he looked around at everything. And I remember going home, and here's the real key that one of my friends just couldn't stop talking about. He said, Kathy, you're the highest salesperson in there. You're getting no respect for who you are, never mind your gender. But they kept I wasn't an employee. I was an independent contractor. And they kept two-thirds of the money and I kept a third. And I was making them a lot of money. And they were going, you don't need them. They need you. Why don't you start your own? And that sort of planted the seed. And I'm sorry to say it took me 8 months later to leave, but I had so much fear. And I write in my book about never stay for the money because I thought I was making a lot of money.
Right.
And and so you have you finally have to get to where I said I can't even walk into that office anymore. I feel so demeaned and not heard and not listened to. And so I think out in the world some of that is still going on, and I in their case I think I'll be bold to say I think some men are really afraid of women, and we should have a way to find some common ground and treat each other well. So I would. So anyway, finally, when I left um, and started my own company, I would say that I wasn't a CEO for more than a year, a little over a year, and I read this article by Willis Harman, a great scientist at the Stanford Research Institute, and he said all these business people are coming over to the Stanford Institute, and they want to talk about having business with science in business, spirituality in business. And I finally told them, well, why don't you start something where people can come and talk about that then? Because they kept coming over and. So he joined too, even though he said at the time he had the same view of business that a lot of people do. But as we got together, and as reading this article on a Saturday, and I was getting so excited, I knew in my gut that this was the place for me because in Orange County, California at the time, this was the late 80s, the dialogue was up here and I needed to go here. And so I was so excited. I couldn't wait to call Willis and on Monday because there was no way I didn't know how to reach anybody. And I talked to Willis and on Monday, and I told him my story, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd be perfect for the academy. I'll have the president of the academy call you." So a couple of days later, the president called me, and we were talking, and he was starting to kind of brush me off. He said, "Oh, well, you have to be a CEO to be in this group." I said, "Well, I am." I didn't tell him only a year, but I said, "I am." Then he said, "Well, you have to do a minimum of $2 million a year in business." I said, "Well," I said, "I'm way past that." And so he was quiet. Then he was really quiet for a while. And I'm going, "Now what?" And then he said, "Well, you'd be the only woman." I said, "Well, I'm used to that. And I think I can bring value to this group and get value." So the way he decided to handle it was he wanted to meet me in person. So I flew to San Francisco, and in not even 30 minutes later, he said, "Wow, you're definitely qualified to come in." So I joined the academy as the first woman. first woman on their board. Um, it just it just was one of the things that I want to say, to have to go to their meetings and to sit with these CEOs of large companies, mostly some entrepreneurs, but to have their advice for all the things I was going through was just, I mean, it was absolutely the best. You couldn't have asked for more. And I do want to say that I wasn't a member more than 2 months, and I got a call from the president, and he said to me, "You know, the Dalai Lama is in Newport Beach for a week." And he says, "How would you like to go?" He says they were going to let 6 members of the World Business Academy in, and it's at a private home with only 40 people, and you get to ask any questions that you want. He's going to sit with each one of you alone. I thought, wow, what an opportunity. I said, no, I'll be there. So, so the backstory to all this is one of my clients that I got and gave to the five guys for 4 years was the Home Depot stores. I got them when they only had 25 stores in the whole country. And by the time I left these five guys, there were 400 stores. But they already told me, your edict is no back orders, and we're opening 246 stores a year, so you've got to keep the existing stores in product and the new stores. So I was so busy, and one of the things they had asked me to do, was to go to China. And I, before I met the Dalai Lama, I was in China. I found this fabulous factory with mostly women making these merchandise bags. I was so happy to give them the business. And we were shipping to the port of Charleston and the port of Los Angeles. I had like 7 containers on the water, and the product was great. I was very excited. And then Tiananmen Square happened in
Mm.
1989, where the Chinese killed about 3,000 students and then denied it all. And I was so upset. And I had a lot of people call me that said, "You need to take a stand for human rights and you need to leave China." And of course, I agreed with them. And I was so confused because, again, I had this giant account that I was trying to work with, and I needed this product to help us fill in for our domestic manufacturers. Frankly, I just didn't know how to do it. I thought I should. I just didn't know how. So, bottom line, I want to share what the Dalai Lama said to me because I would love for everyone to know what he said because it changed my life, really.
Sure.
As we're sitting together, we're on this couch and we're talking, and he is so funny and he's just delightful. He really has a great sense of humor. So when we were talking for a while, then I explained to him what was going on. This was my question for him. And so what he did was he stood up. So of course, when he stood up, I stood up, and he took my hands in his hands and he said, "Kathy, why would you punish the Chinese people further for the thoughts of a few?" He said, "That's not how you create your reality." He said, "You never think about what you don't want. You only put your thoughts into what you want to see, into the pool of consciousness you want to see, act like it's already happened, and you just keep moving forward." You know, if we think about that advice, Keith, that is not only what goes along with everything else I say about leading with love. It's really taking it to even a larger context than that. And that changed the way I viewed everything from that point on. Because a lot of times we don't think about what we want. We're so consumed with everything else. So, what a great lesson. And the academy just got better and better for me. I just kept learning.
I love that story. I'm curious because when something like that happens in another country, our
Uh-huh.
first reaction is we have to pull out because we have to take a stand. And you're
Yeah.
right. We sometimes are, we don't think about the bigger picture And we overreact, I think, to the global impact of us saying we're doing that.
Yes, and I think it's because it was students, and then and at the time, I was there like a month later, and I could see that I would fly into Hong Kong, and then my manufacturer gave us this gift of going over to mainland China. And when I went to mainland China, when I'm in Hong Kong, I'm seeing pictures of this terrible thing. You go there and they're completely silent about it. They acted like it never happened. And I kept trying to talk to people that were our guides to certain things. I said, they would whisper, they go, "We really can't talk about it. We have to act like it never happened." I said, "But what about the mothers whose children don't come home?" It's like I never understood how they handled that. And as a mother, I thought, this was really personally very hard for me. And until the Dalai Lama made me stretch and learn and hold it a different way, because you're right, we seem to go right to that way of holding it. I do want to say that fortunately, because of the academy, I did get to meet him again two other times, and he remembered me and my story. And I kept thinking, and I said, "Thank you for really shifting how I held life." It was great.
I love that. Let's get into your book because I'm curious now because you've kind of led us into the love part of it. The name of your book is The Wisdom of Love in Business. What led you to write that book?
Well, what again? I had the Home Depot account for 7 years at this time. I ended up having them for 30 years, but this was 7 years. And my buyer left that I had done all these programs with. The great CEOs that started it, they were fabulous. And they asked me to please store, door, deliver nationwide. That shifted my kind of work too. I needed more employees, and think about wherever a Home Depot store is, you're going to deliver there all over the country. I mean, it was a huge shift. So I got this buyer that took over for mine, and oh, he was so difficult, so difficult. He was a person that would get this close to your face and scream and yell and threaten the business, and someone who would ask you about some program and how it's working, and you start to tell him he thinks he's heard enough, and then he moves on to something else, and yet he didn't really get it. And it was so difficult. I remember coming back to my company. This was at the store support center in Atlanta, Georgia, where their headquarters is. And of course, I'm in Newport Beach, California. I came home and I thought, honestly, I'm going to give up this account. And everyone said, "What do you mean?" They're opening 246 stores a year, and you are so involved. You are their main supplier for their expense products for the store. And how could you leave? I said, "I just can't work. I don't think I should even have to work with someone like this." I almost forgot everything I know. So I flew, and every time I go up to the academy meeting, I would complain about this guy every month. So finally, there was an intervention from the World Business Academy with me. I'll put it that way, because they finally said, "No more stories about him. Close your eyes." So I'm sitting there and they said, "Do you think this man is another aspect of the divine?" It's exactly what they said. And I was closing my eyes, and all I could picture was him screaming at me really close. And so I opened my eyes and I'm looking at all my who are really authentic friends. And I said, "Well, I might be one with all of you. I'm not one with him." They said, then they all laughed at me. And they said, "Oh, Kathy, you've forgotten everything you know. Close your eyes again." They said, "Do you think he's coming from love or from fear?" Well, that's when I started to know that I had to remember. But I opened my eyes, and of course, I had to still make him wrong. I said, "Well, he's not very loving." And so they said to me, "Well, then do you think fear is the truth of him?" And I know that's not the truth of anybody. We're all God's children and we're all born in love. And so I thought, they said, "This is what we want you to do. And you should do this with anyone that's really difficult, and is harder to work with, because all you do when he complains, you're bartering up against him, and nothing really it's not productive, and it's certainly not satisfactory. It's a difficult way to work." So they said, "We want you to beam him love. I don't care if it's on the phone, I don't care if it's in person, but you don't have to say anything, but let your higher self do business with his higher self, and just love him for the way he is and the way he's not." So I remember flying home that day from the meeting thinking, this is not going to be easy. How am I supposed to beam him love? And I was really looking at my belief system, which I think is very important. So, and it's like synchronicity. Right after I got home, he called because there was all these price increases on Poly, and so he said, "We're the depot and we're not paying for this. Get in my office." He was really upset. So I ended up flying to Atlanta shortly after that. And I'm sitting in the waiting room thinking about beaming him love. Anyway, bottom line is I did do that. And I did it for a year and a half. And a year and a half, and I never said anything. I just created a space for me just to accept him and love him for the way it was. And he called one Friday night, late for him, and about 4 o'clock for us here. And I had an appointment with one of our manufacturers on Monday, who just wasn't getting the product out on time. And he would tell us the truck left and they hadn't made it yet. And I had too many stores for that kind of production. But we liked him and we didn't want him to go away. But so he called, and this is what he said. "Now, I want you to see if we can get this, straightened out." And then he was quiet. And sometimes when he was quiet on the phone, then he'd start yelling about something. So when he's quiet, I never knew what to expect. But this time he said, "Kathy, how you come in a room sometimes and things just seem to calm down." He said, "Do that." And my son was right near me because he worked with me, and he heard it. And I looked at him, and he knew that he finally was really feeling what I've been doing. And I have to say, from that point on, not only did he give us just millions of dollars more worth of business because he loved us as vendors and was always wanting to be around us, and was always saying, "Look at these guys, they're like family, they're not like vendors." I mean, it paid off in spades, and I would have to say that I learned a lot. And from that point on, I that's the way I did business. So your earlier question about why do you think it's sort of still going on today, I think we all need to have maybe our own personal experiences to see the shift in things. But that's a long answer to your question: is why did I write the book? I wrote the book because we did between 30 and 40 million dollars a year in business. You don't get that, and you don't keep an account for over 30 years if you're not doing something right. And I definitely wrote it and I kind of was leaning towards women because I wanted women never to believe what I was told. Because you got to remember, when I was told all that, I wasn't even thinking about my own company. But I've not only empowered myself, I've empowered others, and I've empowered business and the way. And thanks to all the wonderful people around me, including the Dalai Lama, it changed my view. And also, I tell people, not only is business relationship, but success is an inside job. So we have to look at what is our belief systems. And I really did that in spades. I looked at the biology of my belief systems and where in my life did I have to forgive myself? Did I have to forgive someone else? And let all those things go and let your own genius and creativity come out. And that's the other reason I wrote the book. My book has a lot of tools for transformation in it because it's all the things I learned.
I love that word transformation because that's a key for so much that we do in life is transformation. How do
Yeah.
you how do you teach that to people? Because it's hard to just kind of wrap your mind around. I mean, we can define it in our minds, but how do you teach that to people?
Well, I think the way that, and I had a co-writer who the Academy used, and she's just wonderful. She straight A's at Harvard. She's in the Writers Guild of America, and she writes scripts for Hollywood. So she's really good. And when I told her this is a business book, but I really wanted to show, more of a higher consciousness that we could hold and do this with, and she said, I've always wanted to write a book with about women in business. So we did this together, and the way we did it was I share my story about how it all started, and then for each chapter I have a quote, a good an old wisdom quote, I call it, that this quote, then I give you a story in my life that almost matches the quote. And then at the end of the chapter, I have what I call a Dear Reader page. And then I say, Dear reader, where in your life is this going on? Have you looked at this? This was my way of teaching, not only telling what happened to me, but having them look a little deeper. Then we go on to the next chapter, and there's more quotes. And by the end of the whole book, we did this tools for transformation. There's a couple pages, and we took every chapter and like the major lesson for each chapter, and we put, and even I go to my book, to my tools for transformation, when I think I need it. So that would be my way of teaching what I learned, because honestly, the things that have happened to me since, I mean, even to get the National Association of Women Business Owners gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. And that says a lot for women nationwide. And also, in Orange County, California, I was in the top 40 women owned businesses. This is a great way to teach, because these are great things that happened that I wasn't even expecting. It was just doing the inner work. And that was my way of sharing my friend Jean Houston always says, people learn from storytelling, tell your story. So I finally wrote the book. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are a unique group of people. Uh,
Yes.
So, what are some, if you're talking to a young entrepreneur right now who's just starting out, what advice do you have for them?
I still say, do the inner work, because we don't, we've all had trauma in our life. And sometimes we don't know that the trauma is still gets in the way of everything we think we want to do, but it stops us. It did for me too. I have a lot of fear. My fear was so strong. It was like this pillar, a steel pillar next to me, and everywhere I'd move, it'd go with me. And finally, I just talked to it. I said, I know you're there, but come on along. We're going to do this anyway. I mean, you have to realize what the way you're thinking. And I like that word, the biology of belief, because it does make a difference on how we live. So that's the one thing I would say, because I too, and that's what I talk about in the book, because I had a lot of fear. And when you move through, when you can just forgive and move on, I have to tell you, it seemed like synchronistically things started to drop in my lap because I was open to them. So that would be my greatest advice for any entrepreneur. Yeah.
What do you hope readers take away from reading your book?
Well, I hope that they see the success that comes from being loving and putting the human spirit into business. It's just, I don't think it's there enough. And when I look at this difficult buyer that I had, by my loving him, it not only made me a better person, it made my company grow, but he recently retired and had his 70th birthday party in Las Vegas and invited me and my son. And he couldn't thank us enough. He said, "You are like family." He said, "You you were so delightful to do business with, and you did. And the other thing is, you've just got to do what you say you're going to do. That's a big thing. A lot of people don't do what they say they're going to do. So that's a lot of that's in the book. I mean, all the takeaways that I learned are in the book, because if you don't share your story, I mean, this is how people learn. And I definitely, like I say, think there's just people that don't know how to let go of the things that are stopping them. And my book shows how I did everything. And in the first line in my book, it says, I was born with one eye on the door and one eye looking inward. I think I was just born to actually out process this, go through this, and probably teach that. I think so.
That's awesome. So how's your book being received?
Very well. Now that it was called first, I published it as Feet to the Fire: Finding My Soul and Success. And Jack Canfield, who's been a friend of mine for a long time, had he didn't like the cover, and he said, we don't want to talk about your success. We want to show people that if they read this book, there's some transformational tools so they can be successful. So we changed the name of the book to The Wisdom of Love and Business: Transformational Tools for Entrepreneurial to Achieve Entrepreneurial Success. So ever since that, it's really been much better. And a lot of people are talking about it now. And I've also talked to, I really enjoy talking to the universities and the young people, because if you start younger, especially at that formative age, I think it's very helpful. I mean, I didn't start my company until I was like 40. I mean, so it's, yeah. So that's how it's been. It's better now, because I think that the title is I think more acceptable, and Jack loves it. And I really have had so much work working with Dr. Deepak Chopra endorsed my book, and so did Gene Houston and Joan Borisenko, and some of the people that have been in all this wonderful new thinking about raising your consciousness and being more loving, for sure.
That's great. I'm always curious, Kathy. You seem really excited and really energetic. What are you excited about in this season of your life?
Well, I am a lifelong learner, and I love travel. And I've done a little bit of it, but ever since we've redone the book, I have really been busy with the book. But I have my eye on more travel, because I think there has to be balance in life. And so sometimes we get into some periods where it seems like it's so focused that we're not looking at anything else. But no, I love to learn. And I think by travel, you learn and you talk to other people and you find out what their thinking is and you learn. So, yeah, that's what excites me the most now.
That's awesome. I love to travel too. Don't have much time to do
Yeah.
much of it, but I'm going to have to do more of it in my life.
Yes, I support that. Yeah.
I'm always love to ask my guests this question. What do
Okay.
you want your legacy to be?
hmm. I, um, I just think it's learning to live with kindness and compassion and mindfulness. And now that's what I do, and I'm kind to everyone. And certainly in doing business, there's I like to tell people, you really have to walk gently around people, because some wounds are not visible. And so it was a very hard lesson for me. I struggled until I did have some help, again, the intervention. And I think that that's really what I hope to continue to teach, and to where people will remember that.
That's awesome. I love that. As we wrap up our conversation, what key takeaways do you want the listeners to gather from our discussion today?
um, how I think we think we know our future. And when I was working for these five men and I was just working away and doing well, I didn't even think about the larger picture for me. And I think sometimes I just want people to not stay in their limitations, but to think bigger. And and that's what the book really shows. And we all are available, and to be more open and loving. It's all there. It's all on the inside. We are divine, and we do have it within us. We just have to decide that that's what we want for our life.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So, where can people find your book, The Wisdom of Love in Business, and connect with you on social media?
Okay. Well, my book is for sale on Amazon. There's also an Audible book as well as a book. And then I have a website, thewisdomofloveinbusiness.com. There's some other things on there. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn under Kathy Gardarian. And it's Kathy at kathygardarian.com.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for what you do and for sharing this because it reminded me to take a look at ourselves. And I love that
Mhm.
idea of leading with love because we have so much disharmony in our culture today. And
So much.
instead of returning with love, we kind of return either with fear or anger. But to pour into people with love, it just kind of leads in the way that, like you said, God created us to be. And to walk into a
Absolutely.
room and leave it with love. Somebody said, sparkle Jesus as you walk into a room. I just kind of love that idea.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Well, what a joy it's been to be with you, Keith. Thank you. I love sharing my story with you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And blessings on your book. May you sell billions of copies because I think it has huge impact for the way the business world can be that place where people can
Yeah,
find
it works.
themselves and
Yeah,
impact and change the world.
great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again, and tune in next time.